And now, Kate Larsen.
I lead a global research team of economists, energy modelers, and scientists at the Rhodium Group, an independent research firm. This research is critical to understanding where we are today, how effective our efforts have been, and what we need to do now. So I'll start with the good news. Since the Paris Agreement was adopted, we've massively shifted down our expectations about the pace of growth of global emissions over the next few decades. Before the Paris Agreement was adopted in 2015, we expected emissions to continue to grow at a pretty steady clip over the next few decades. But with the pledges that were adopted and submitted as part of the Paris Agreement for the near term, for the 2030 time period, we've now bent that curve and expect emissions to remain flat. That's not where we need to be, but it is a significant improvement on where we expect it to be. So in 2040, that means that emissions will be about a third less than we thought they would be only 7 years ago. And the emission reductions that we have locked in now have been pretty evenly distributed across a wide range of different countries, both developed and developing. Some of this comes from a decreased expectation for economic growth, but much of it is from decreasing energy intensity of these economies and a decrease in the carbon intensity of that energy. That's really now slowed our expectations about how much warming we'll see over the course of the century. So before Paris, the world was on track to see warming of about 4.6 degrees centigrade. With the current 2030 pledges that have been put in place to date, now we're expecting to limit warming to around 2.6 degrees Celsius. Again, this is not where we need to be, but every fraction of a degree of warming that we can avoid today will make a huge difference. Let me put that into some human terms. Before the Paris Agreement, we expected to see as much as 200 million additional premature deaths just from heat-related mortality, from people suffering from heat stroke. Now, with the pledges that have been put in place to date by 2030, we've reduced the expected deaths by 80%. When you look at sea level rise, with the pledges, we've reduced expected number of people that would be impacted by sea level rise by a quarter to a third. And as we all know, the people who are most impacted by climate change are the ones who have contributed the least to global emissions. This shows the expected rise in heat-related mortality across the world as a result of climate change, produced by the Climate Impact Lab, a consortium of economists and scientists from the Rhodium Group and other academic institutions. As you can see, the types of heat waves that have devastated India and Pakistan today will become the norm in much of Africa, the Middle East, even Southern Europe and the Southern US. And we know it's the communities within these countries that are the lowest income that are the most impacted. So again, every fraction of a degree really matters. But we know the 2030 pledges are just the first step. Many countries, in fact, 80 countries, representing 3/4 of global emissions, have committed to reduce their emissions to zero by mid-century. I think this is something that everyone present at the adoption of the Paris Agreement, I don't think there are many people who would have predicted that we would be here today. It is a massive change from where we were only 7 years ago. So if all of those net zero goals are implemented, that means we can limit warming to around 1.9 to 2 degrees Celsius. That goal still doesn't meet our 1.5 degree goal, but it is a very important indicator that we can do this. But this is premised on full implementation of all of these pledges. So if Paris was the era of raising ambition, getting new pledges from a whole stream of new actors, now is the era of implementation. And now, more than ever, there is broad agreement that all countries, all companies need to get to net zero by mid-century. And now, more than ever, there is broad agreement about how to do this. So using the US as an example, I'm happy to echo John Doerr. the types of actions we need to take are very clear. One, rapidly decarbonize the electric power sector within the next decade. Two, electrify everything we can, vehicles, cars, most trucks, buildings. Three, develop and deploy the advanced clean fuels that we need to decarbonize the most hard-to-abate sectors, industry, aviation, shipping, the kinds of fuels like green hydrogen and sustainable aviation fuels. Four, we need to reduce emissions like HFCs that come from air conditioning and refrigeration, and methane from oil and gas production and agriculture. Five, we need to protect our natural lands and help them to sequester carbon. And six, for all the remaining carbon, we need to capture it and store it. To do this will require a massive scale up of the technologies that we have available today: wind, solar, electric vehicles. It will also require massive investment and innovation in the technologies that are not commercially at scale today: clean hydrogen, direct air capture, sustainable aviation fuels, and others. This will require companies, governments, and investors all to work together to make sure that they make good on their commitments for net zero. And to do that, it will require public action, public political will, and to do that requires people to use their purchasing power, their protesting power, and in particular, their voting power. Thank you.